Los Cenzontles is a nonprofit, which we have an academy where kids learn music, dance, arts and crafts, jewelry, folk arts. We're a band that comes from the alumni of the academy, and sometimes young students join us as well. We're also a production studio where we record. We've done 35 albums to date. We've done 20 documentaries, hundreds of music videos. And I think what we are is actually somewhat simple. We're local people teaching community culture to local kids. When I was looking for a name for the group back in, I think, 1990, I looked at some different Aztec poetry books, that kind of thing, to find a name, a word. And when I read the famous poem um, that's printed on the 100 peso bill in tiny little letters, that made the Sensontle really pop out to me, which is the bird of 400 voices. And the poem is, I love the song of the mockingbird, the Sensontle, bird of 400 voices. I love the color of jade and the smell of flowers, but more than anything, I love my fellow man. And the beauty of that poem to me was really that our work was rooted in people. It's very often we talk about culture as kind of artifacts or commodity, but our work was always, or we talk about folklore or tradition kind of in these lofty, almost inhuman terms, as if it was something, nebulous and pristine, when in fact culture and our tradition is really very much part of our human experience. And Los Cenzontles was always about the kids. It was always about the work that we did to uncover our own connection. There are some more aspects of the 400 voices that I find really intriguing, which is that Mexico has many different regional styles of music. It doesn't just have one or two. People think of mariachi, think of son jarocho, but there are so many more beautiful regional styles. And Los Cenzontles has explored not all of them, but some of them. And they're like different voices that we've incorporated into our voice, much as the mockingbird, the Sensontle, incorporates the sounds that it hears into its voice. But then when you add being Mexican American or just a modern person, there are so many other elements, whether it's rock and roll or blues or classical music or jazz. These are all other voices that we also make part of our voices. And why that's important, as I talk about in the book, is that very often we ethnic or racial minorities in this country are kind of forced to choose one identity, which is not the human reality. We are many things. We are multiple voices. And in the United States, growing up over the last many years, that people want me to be this or that or the other thing, and they're confused by me being all of the above. But why shouldn't I be? I'm a human being.
Gracias a todos ustedes. Muchas gracias, muchas gracias.
As my life progressed, I got into music. I decided that I really wanted to make music in more of a community setting. I wanted to work with kids. I wanted to get into traditional Mexican music. And at that time, it was very clear to me that as a Mexican American, I really wasn't considered part of the Mexican tradition. People would see us Chicanos as kind of like more like spectators to our own tradition when it came to the folk traditions. This music affected me very deeply, and many of us, but somehow we could only be consumers of this music. We can't be maestros ourselves. And so my work with kids coincided with meeting some incredible folk musicians from Mexico who invited us into the traditions, not just as spectators, but as participants. And that became my model, my method, as we continued to work with Los Cenzontles. I've always had to justify or explain what we did. I have a lot of stories that illustrate the challenges that we are confronted with and the solutions that we have found to access our own heritage and make it part of our voice. So the book became another way for me to tell that story. I mean, I've told the story through songs, I've told the story just among friends, I've told the story from the stage, but the book just became another vehicle to tell the story, and it offers different advantages. We met Linda in 1993, and we were raising money for a trip to Veracruz with our children, and we didn't have any money. So we had maybe 2 weeks to go to raise the money. And we were playing for change in San Francisco. We were at the Palace of Fine Arts and those beautiful big pillars. It was foggy, and a friend of mine brought her friend Linda, and I mean, who was going to expect Linda Ronstadt to be sitting there? I didn't connect Linda with Linda. So when my friend told me that, hey, you're talking to Linda Ronstadt right now, it just made my head explode. And and my friend said, she wants to help you guys go to Mexico. And we just stayed in touch over the years, and our relationship turned into really something very beautiful, something very fruitful. We've had many different ways to collaborate with each other. And I think it's a little confusing for some people because we're not a conservatory of virtuosos. We're just a community organization. And so people, I think, would assume that Linda would be supporting something more like a America's Got Talent or Mexican America's Got Talent or something. And that's never who we've been. But I think what they don't understand is that Linda came from a family of musicians, and she learned the music that she has recorded over the years in her home. So she values that. She values homemade music. And I think the reason why we've connected so deeply over the decades is that we share values. And the same thing happened with Los Lobos. In 1994, the year after, I received a call from a children's music label, and they asked me if I would help put together songs for a children's record by Los Lobos. And so, again, that was something that just I stumbled upon. And I was getting pretty good at finding songs for Los Cenzontles. So I said, heck yeah, I mean, I love Los Lobos. I had been listening to them for years. And the reason that I love them so much is that Los Lobos were doing Mexican folk music as Mexican Americans with full pride and full energy. And that was a model for me. It's like, wow, it isn't this pristine folkloric world. And, again, we Chicanos are kind of like on the spectator side, but they were just embracing it and taking it for their own. And so I just had a huge admiration for them. So walking into the Papa's Dream record, I was very nervous. I didn't have a lot of experience in the professional music world. I guess in a way I still don't. I work with kids, but they were very inviting and they were very kind. And I think we put together a nice record that introduced Los Lobos, Lalo Guerrero, and also our traditions to generations of children. When I incorporated in 1994, that's when we really were able to expand and deepen our project. And in 1998, we got our own space because we had been renting space by the hour. We finally got a storefront here in San Pablo. And we got our own studio, we got our own stage. And I like to think that, I mean, the reality is that we were not getting invited. We were getting invited to perform, but not as much as I would have liked. So we built a stage. We were not getting invitations to record, so we built a studio. We weren't finding places to learn our music, so we built an academy. So basically, we were resourceful and we were resilient. We saw obstacles and we just found ways around them. At that same time, there was an afternoon when I was coming back from recording with Lobos in Papa's Dream. 1994, I got back to the airport here in the Bay Area. And on the cover of the Chronicle, I saw a picture of one of my students, Ruth, with her friends crying, and they were grieving the death of their friend. Their friend, Cecilia Rios, was a 15-year-old girl from Richmond High School who had been raped and murdered at a local elementary school when she was walking home from school. And the teenagers in the neighborhood were having a really hard time, of course. So we put together a workshop to write verses. And it was clear to me that, we weren't going to write one of these kind of like these new singer-songwriter kind of like emotion, like me, I feel. No, the kids weren't ready for that. They were having trouble expressing themselves. So it occurred to me that the corrido was just a perfect model or form, because the corrido is a narrative. You're telling a story. So you sit down with kids and you say, how do you feel? They may not be able to answer it, but you say what happened. and they chronicled the story of what happened to Ceci, and then ultimately talk about how they feel. And so that, became this example of a model of how our traditions can serve us in contemporary times. I spent years trying to convince people that culture matters. And I believe that in a multicultural democracy such as ours, being culturally engaged is as important as voting, and voting is very important. And so when we look at the political landscape right now, we're presented with this antiquated or fictional binary of a white America. I think it is particularly important for all of us, including white people, to dig deeply into our cultures, engage with them, and engage with others through culture. That is power, I believe.